This episode is brought to you by Mother Dirt. What is Mother Dirt? Mother Dirt is a skincare line and a range that you may have seen me post probably about 9 or 10 months ago when I very first used this company. Now, obviously, I care about what I put into my body, and a lot of you do too. But do you actually know what you're putting on your body, on your skin? There are a lot of chemicals coming in the form of makeup and soaps and detergents that we really do not know. And unfortunately, sometimes I do know what they can actually do to us. So this line is completely clean. It's formulated without a fragrance or sulfates or parabens or preservatives. And it's clinically tested for heavy metal contaminants. It's non-irritating, hyperallergenic, and allergy tested, and perfect for those sensitive little puppies like myself. So check out Mother Dirt. The link is in our show notes, Mother Dirt. Hey everybody, thank you ever so much for joining me. This is the Knowledge and Mileage podcast, and today I have a very special guest. Now this is quite funny actually. This is Jim Kwik that I'm speaking to right now. Now the thing that I said is funny is that you have a surname called Kwik, and
Right.
you are known as the quick thinker. Now my surname is Gethin, get thin. So I've been known to help people get thin. So maybe there's some universe that has brought us together, or maybe I'm just coming up with a really bad joke. But anyway, my special guest, Jim Kwik, thank you ever so much for joining me on the Knowledge and Mileage podcast, sir. I appreciate it.
Kris, it's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you everyone who's joining us for this conversation about how to be faster, smarter, and better. We're going to talk about one of the most amazing muscles, and it's not really a muscle, but metaphorical muscles, which is our brains. And I'm going to show people, we're going to talk about how to have better focus, how to improve your memory, how to learn faster, and really catch up, keep up, and get ahead. So it's a real honor to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Really, really, I'm the one that's honored. I can't wait to delve into this, because I think a lot of people do overlook the power of the mind. You know, some people get into a relationship and think, oh, this is as good as it gets. And people think the same with their brain. They just think, I get that brain fog. Well, that's normal. You know, they're umming and ahhing over words. They can't think of that word. And they just think, well, that's normal. Maybe not the case. And you're going to be able to let us know. So, Jim, could you briefly give us a background of yourself, what you do, who you work with, for my listeners who may not be familiar with you?
Sure, Kris. So I call myself a brain coach. You know, people in business, they have business coaches. You have a financial coach, maybe a sales coach. Singers have voice coaches. People have personal trainers, and I guess I would be a personal trainer for your mind. As many people want to be physically fit, they want to be faster, they want to be stronger, they want to be more flexible, they want to have more energy, they want to have a pliability, if you will. That's what I want to do for your mind. I want your mind to be faster, your mind to be stronger, your mind to be more flexible, more agile, more pliable, if you will, because I find that, you know, it's so important in the age that we live in right now. It's not just having brute strength, it's having brain strength, right? It's not just having muscle power, it's also having mind power. The thing is, your brain doesn't come with an owner's manual, right? And it's not user friendly. And so what I do is I coach people not only to be mentally intelligent, meaning I could show people how to learn facts, figures, formulas really fast, if you will, but also besides mental intelligence, I'm very interested in mental fitness. You know, just even if people aren't using a technique, they have this youthful, vibrant mind, and they're stronger, and they show up, you know, with the best of them. They come home at the end of the day, people ask them how their day was, they're like, I crushed it. And that's really what it's really all about. And to answer your question, what I do is when people see me on stage or they watch me on YouTube, they'll see me do these demonstrations where I'll memorize a room full of people's names. Like I'll have 50 people stand up and they'll introduce themselves and I'll call them out by name in real time. Or people give me a 100-digit number or 100 words and I'll memorize them forwards and backwards. I always tell people, Kris, that I don't do this to impress you. I do this really to express to you what's really possible. Because the truth is every single person who's with us today can do that and a whole lot more. It's just we weren't shown. we weren't taught. If anything, I feel like we were taught a lie. We were taught a lie through marketing or media that somehow we're not good enough, that we're not smart enough, that we're somehow broken, if you will, that our potential is somehow fixed like our shoe size. And it's absolutely not true. I feel like the work that you and I do and so many of your listeners do is our work really is about transcending. It's about ending the trance, ending this mass hypnosis, done maybe through marketing or media, just saying that we're not enough and that we need to be somehow fixed, if you will. And I feel like that people have genius inside of them. It's just really school didn't show us really how to unleash it. Maybe didn't prepare us for the world that we live in today. School taught us a lot about what to learn, like math and history and science and Spanish. But how many classes really were on how to learn, how to think critically, how to solve problems, how to be creative, how to focus, how to concentrate, how to listen better, how to apply your knowledge. I love the title of your show because you're right. What's the point in learning something if you're not going to get mileage? You're not going to let the rubber meet the road, right? All the books, tapes, seminars, podcasts, all that, it doesn't work unless you do. Right? Knowledge is not power. Knowledge, as you've heard, we've all heard, it's potential power at best. It only becomes power when we apply it. So my message for people is, as we're going through this, I'm going to share with you techniques on how to remember names, how to build your memory, the ways to hack your brain to learn any subject or skill faster. But you don't want this just to sit on the shelf. So many people go out there and buy books and they just sit there and it becomes shelf help and not real self-help, if you will. And really, that makes you no better. People take pride in, I have this degree or I have this, but unless you're getting, your results speak for themselves. So I'm always telling people, don't say it, show it. Don't promise it, prove it, right? Because your results speak volumes. And it's always better well done than well said. And so but I know this because I know everybody can do this because I grew up with learning difficulties. A lot of people are surprised when they hear that, but it stemmed from an accident I had when I was a kid. I was 5 years old. I had a traumatic brain injury, which led to a head trauma, if you will, led to a lot of learning difficulties. I was put in special classes. Teachers would repeat themselves over and over and over again. And at the end, I just pretend to understand, but I didn't really understand. I had bad focus. I had poor memory. It actually took me, Kris, an extra 3, almost 4 years longer to learn how to read. And I remember at the age of 9, a teacher pointing to me, talking to another adult, saying, "That's the boy with the broken brain."
Wow.
And it's so crazy, right? Like adults, parents have to be extremely careful with the words you use because your external words become a child's internal words. And you wonder where that negative self-talk comes from, where we say things to ourselves all the time. On things like, "Oh, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, that person, I just can't learn this," or whatever it is. And I remember I was preparing to run a marathon. A lot of pressure when your name is Kwik. And it's funny with the last names when you're talking about that because, you could say maybe you and I, our life, our destiny was pretty much planned out. For me, I had to be a runner back in school. A lot of pressure again. I have to be careful when I'm driving because the worst name to have on your driver's license when you get pulled over for speeding, when you show the police officer your license says Kwik right on it, because you're not going to talk your way out of that speeding ticket. And I get to do my mission in life, which is teaching people how to learn faster, to read faster, to remember, focus faster. Because I find the most valuable thing that we have in our life really comes down to our time. And that's why I really appreciate everybody who joins us right now, because you're self-selecting. You are a leader because you want to level up your learning so you can level up your life, if you will. Because that's why I want to make sure that in the session that we have together that I give 1,000%, because even though a show or a podcast is free, it's not really free because it costs your attention, your time. And so I want to fill this with very practical tools. But just to shorten up this story, basically I grew up with these learning difficulties and I learned how to compensate at the age of 18. I struggled all through school, but eventually I hit a wall where I was hospitalized because I couldn't keep up. I would just not eat, not sleep, and not do all the things, not work out, all the things that you teach. And I end up wasting away. I ended up passing out in the library. I fell down a flight of stairs. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. And at this time, I was down to 117 pounds. I mean, I was so I was dying. I mean, it was the darkest time. I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever felt like despair, but every day of your life as a child to an adult, 18, I just felt like I wasn't enough. And every time I wasn't picked on the team or I did badly on a test, which was all the time, I would say, oh, because I'm the boy with the broken brain. And as I was preparing for this marathon recently, I realized that there was reading a chapter that said this verbatim. It was on the psychology of running a marathon, right? The mental aspect. And it said this word for word because I'm a memory expert. It said, your brain is like a supercomputer and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to. And this is just, people know this, but as a coach, sometimes, and you know this, it's not always knowing more than the other person, but it's getting them to do it, right? A good coach motivates you, inspires you. They can't do it for you any more than you can read a book on push-ups and get any benefit unless you're actually going to do the work, right? But as a coach, yeah, my goal is to make common sense more common practice, right? And not leave it there. So, using our self-talk, I always tell people to monitor your self-talk. When you say things like, people come to me all the time saying, Jim, I'm so forgetful, or Jim, I'm just getting older, or Jim, I'm losing this, or I'm not enough, whatever. But your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk, right? And if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. You argue for your limits, they're yours. And so you have to be very careful of that. And so when I woke up in the hospital bed at 117 pounds, I thought there had to be a better way. And when I had that thought, the nurse came in with a mug of tea, and on the mug itself, had a picture of a really smart person, Albert Einstein. It was like a genius, right? The opposite of what I felt I was at the time. And it had this quote I know you've heard, and a lot of your listeners have heard before in different forms. It said, the same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem. The same level of thinking that's created your problem in your business, in your health, in your relationship, it won't solve the problem, right? And it made me think of your question saying, well, what's my problem? My problem is I'm a very slow learner. I have a very slow brain. I was like, well, ask another question. How can I think about it differently? And I was like, well, maybe I can learn how to learn faster. And I put my studies aside because it was to no avail anyway. And I started reading books on how to learn. Understanding adult learning theory and multiple intelligences and what focus really is and mnemonics and speed reading, because I wanted to really solve, I don't believe in problems. I think the words we use really change our experience. So when somebody says they have a problem, it makes you like, oh man, like somebody calls you up and say, oh, we have a problem. You're like, oh, goodness, what is it? But instead of problem, maybe changing that word to a word like puzzle. And because for me, using a word like puzzle is like, oh, okay, there's a solution. Puzzles are fun, right? And it's something that I want to be able to take on. And so I wanted to solve this puzzle, which is how does my brain work so I can work my brain? How does my memory really work so I can work my memory? Not ivory tower theory. That I love studying that stuff, but I want to take it down to brass tacks and just how do I use this to make my life better and easier? And about 60 days into it, a light switch went on, and I started to understand things for the first time. And I started to remember things. I started to read faster and retain it. And these are all the things before I would read a page in a book, get to the end, and just forget what I just read, right? Anyone feel like, who's listening to this, feel absent-minded? Yeah. You ever go to the store to buy one thing, and you come back with like 2 bags of things, except for that one thing you needed to buy, right? Or, you feel overloaded or overwhelmed. And these are all problems that if you're struggling with, it's not your fault. It's just the school system didn't prepare us for the world that exists now. I mean, we live in an age, I do trainings for Elon Musk, and it's at SpaceX and such for his rocket scientists and engineers. But we live in an age where we have spaceships that are going to Mars and cars that are self-driving. But our vehicle of choice when it comes to learning, education, is like a horse and buggy. It hasn't changed as much as the world has changed. And, they say of Rip Van Winkle, the guy who slept for decades, if he woke up today, the only thing he would recognize are our schools. And, it's challenging because if you're struggling, it's not your fault because we all grew up with the 20th century education. And the 20th century education prepared us for a 20th century world. And at the turn of the century, it was working on farms and factories and following simple directions We never had to think for ourselves. We never to be able who could have anticipated with technology that we're drowning information nowadays, that the amount of information is doubling at dizzying speeds. Don't people feel that? Like you're taking a sip of water out of a fire hose, right? You're too much information, but we're starving for wisdom, something that's very practical and doable. So when I got these results, all of a sudden I just couldn't help but help other people. And one of my very first students, the reason why I'm talking to you here today is because I got really upset. I wanted to help other people because I was like, wow, so many people are suffering from overload, digital distraction, digital dementia, digital depression, right? All these challenges that technology is driving. Well, and I'm not a pessimist. Like I love technology, it makes my life convenient, but it also could cripple us because just like physically, if you're just relying on technology like a car and an elevator, just as simple examples all the time, and you're not moving your body, it's use it or lose it, right? And a lot of our mental muscles are getting flabby because we're not using it, because we're outsourcing our brains to our smart devices all the time. And so how do you reconcile this idea that we're taught that your brain is this incredible supercomputer and it's the most advanced, complex device, in the known universe, but you forget where you put your car keys, right? You forget it, if you shampooed your hair and you end up doing it twice, right? And so my work is helping people, showing them what I believe is the most important skill to master in the 21st century, which is your ability to learn, learning how to learn. And one of my very first students, when I was 18, I started teaching this. She was a freshman in college, and she read 30 books in 30 days. And can you imagine, Kris, like going online, going to the bookstore, picking up 30 books on marketing, on fitness, on whatever, diet, whatever it is, and not just reading it, but absorbing it and applying it. And I wanted to find out not how she did it. I know how she did it because I taught her. I want to know why. I'm so interested in human motivation. Like what gets people, what separates the people that actually, you know, put the foot on the gas and get the miles out of what they know, right? Because few people do it. This few who do versus the many who talk and the many who have excuses and the many who complain about stuff. And I found out that her motivation was this. Her mother was dying of terminal cancer, was only given 2 months, 60 days to live. And the books she was reading were books on health, wellness, energy, alternative, all these different things because she was determined to save her mom's life. And I find out 6 months later, I get a call from this young lady, and she's crying. She's crying. And when she stops, I find out they're tears of joy that her mother not only survived, but is really getting better. Doctors don't know how, they don't know why. They called it a miracle. But her mother attributed it to 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter, who learned it from all these books. And at that moment, I realized that if knowledge is power, learning is your superpower. And it's a superpower available for all of us, regardless of our age, our background, our career, our education, our financial situation, our gender, our personal history. It's just we weren't taught how to access those superpowers. And I'm not talking about leaping tall buildings and shooting lasers out of our eyes. I'm talking about mental superpowers like focus, like reading faster, like remembering things that you need to do, conversations, giving a speech without notes, having the ability to solve problems, making good decisions. And these are the things I really, because I grew up with a broken brain, $1 billion doesn't motivate me a whole lot, but 1 billion brains coming online, being the best, brightest there could be. I mean, who knows? I have a podcast, right? And who knows if somebody listening to this right now, our conversation is in some third world country, in some village, listening to this on their phone, and they become the next, Malala, or they become the next Elon Musk, and they end up solving some, amazing, they optimize their brain and their creativity and their motivation, and they end up solving some real problems that we have in the world. And so that motivates me a lot. No brain left behind.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's fantastic, and I'm sure everybody listening to this is kind of nodding their head, thinking, okay, I could really get this because I'm going through the same. So just stepping back, when he was talking about school, so for one, I remember my first day of school as if it was yesterday. I can remember the sand pit, the yellow Tonka truck I was playing with, and turned around to the teacher and asked, where's my mum? And she said, oh, she's just gone shopping, she'll be back. She never came back that day. That was my first day of school. Stay there. And then I thought, okay, now I get it. This is how you stay at school until 4 o'clock. But then again, like you said, I will forget. And I remember phone numbers from back then, my
Hmm.
grandmother's phone numbers, everybody's phone numbers. But today, I find that so difficult. So
Yeah.
today, there's various things that I do to try to hack my brain's health. I don't know if you believe in nootropics and having a healthier diet. And I try to read. Sometimes they may be Garfield books. Other times
Yeah.
it could be yours or Jordan Peterson's or something. And I'm trying to exercise my brain. But why do you think today, such as myself, I'm not able to retain things such as phone numbers or anything like
Yeah.
that as I could as, like a 4-year-old kid. I've got memories of my childhood as clear as day.
Yeah. I would say a big part of it has to do with the world we live in right now. I think there are the digital world that we live in are we talk about the reason I talk about superheroes a lot is because when I couldn't read, I taught myself how to read by reading comic books late at night. And I don't know how many people who are here with us watch like Avengers and Justice League and really think about the superhero mythos of overcoming struggles and how struggles lead to strengths. But there are also some supervillains out there, right? Yeah, superheroes, superpowers, but supervillains. And I think the modern day supervillains are four of them that are affecting that or your memory specifically. I would say there's digital overload, right? There's too much information, too little time. So one of the reasons why we're struggling, we're stressed. They call it this is the health concern. They call it information fatigue syndrome. All right, and so it manifests in a higher blood pressure, a compression of leisure time, more sleeplessness, right? All these stress factors. Chronic stress, we know, makes the brain smaller, and so all the when you're going through all the cortisol and the adrenaline and such, it's great for fight or flight, but it's not good if you need to study. It's not good if you need to give a presentation at work and so on. So first of all, there's digital overload, and that's affecting our memory because we're just overloaded and we're not taught how to learn these faster. That's why, when I do my show, I talk about speed reading and accelerated learning skills and such. The second force that's affecting your memory is digital distraction. One of the reasons why we don't have the strong memory is because our focus is askew. Because one of the biggest challenges is with our smart devices. In a way, okay, so for example, they're saying that the human attention span now is less than a goldfish, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But the idea here is we can't focus, and if you can't focus, how do you get things done? And I'm sure a lot of people who are here listening to this could agree that their focus maybe isn't what it once was, right? And some people are multitasking. And we know the science has proven multitasking doesn't work. Like a lot of people are trying to do this and this. I'm not talking about riding your bicycle and being on the phone. I'm talking about doing two or more cognitive activities parallel. Because in actuality, what you're doing, you think you're doing two or three things at once, but you're not. Every single time you switch from one task to another, you lose two things. You lose time because it could take anywhere from a few minutes up to 20 minutes to regain your focus and what they call these flow states. And also you make more errors. They've done this with doctors repeatedly in studies where they have where doctors, when they're multitasking, they make more mistakes. And so that's a big challenge. So we actually lose ground by trying to do more than one thing. And the other thing is, but the reason why is like part of it is these smart devices, right? I always tell people, I have a video out, I think it's up to 30 million views, just came out last month, but it talks about like the worst thing you could do first thing in the morning is to get on your phone. And yet, how many people do that? I mean, it's usually the last thing you look at, at night. It's probably one of the first things most people look at in the morning. But the reason why is when you wake up in the morning, you're in this relaxed state of awareness. You're extremely, extremely suggestible, and so if the first thing you're doing is picking up your phone, you're rewiring your brain for two things. Number one, you're rewiring your brain to be reactive. And that's a big problem, meaning that if you're getting text messages and voicemails and emails that want something from you, right, that it fires, this. Have you ever gotten a message first thing in the morning and it was a bad message and it just ruined your whole day? Because you're just, your mind is calm and clear, and all of a sudden you're dealing and you're reacting to everything. And you can never have a quality of life by just reacting to things. But the second thing you're rewiring your brain, your nervous system to do is to be distracted, because every single like and comment and share and cat video, whatever, it sends this dopamine release. And, that goes along your learning and motivation systems and your nervous system, and it's making you addicted to that. And so a lot of people are addicted to their phones. And the challenge is that distraction, you're building that distraction muscle. So when you need to be able to focus on work, you need to be able to focus on working out, you need to be able to focus and have something in your full attention. Many people can't because their distraction muscles have been so conditioned and exercised. And the other thing also is just, besides digital overload and digital distraction, is this thing called digital dementia. And this is, you and I have talked about this, but it's just this thing where we're outsourcing, like the phone numbers you mentioned. Like, how many phone numbers did you know growing up?
Wow,
like all.
10, 12.
Yeah, you knew like pretty much all the phone numbers you needed to know when you were growing up. But how many phone numbers do you know now?
My own.
And most people know one or maybe two. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate that there's one number you call all the time. But honestly, if your phone was not on, or battery died, or you don't have it with you, you don't know that number, and you call it every single day, you text it every single day. And not that you want to memorize 400 phone numbers. Nobody wants to do that, but we've lost the ability just to remember one. Somebody gives you a phone number or a passcode or a PIN number, or people forget, what their room number was, in the hotel or whatever, right? So digital dementia is a term that basically says we're overusing digital technology, and so there's a breakdown in our cognitive abilities. Even when it comes to GPS, I was talking to Dr. Daniel Amen, who's a brain doctor here in the States. He wrote Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And he's saying GPS, there's so many people that are dependent on it, they're not realizing, so they're not getting early detection of dementia because they're not realizing when they would have a memory lapse because they were depending on technology, so they're not going to doctors to get checked out. Wow. So these are all different ways it manifests. But in a way, my biggest challenge is digital overload, digital distraction, digital dementia. Another one is digital depression, which a lot of people know this, Facebook depression. When you're going through here and you're seeing everybody's amazing, highly, highly curated and filtered life, everyone's comparing their life to some highlight trailer of somebody else's life, and they feel like they're not enough. And you can't have a quality life always, from that place, because you lose your sovereignty and your happiness. And because the happiest people, have cause from the inside, meaning knowing that they're at cause, that they are what I refer to, they are a thermostat, not a thermometer. Meaning, and I know your listeners can relate to this more as being a thermostat than a thermometer, but I feel like to the degree you experience joy and success and happiness is to the degree you more identify with the thermostat than a thermometer. Meaning, think about the functionality of a thermometer. The primary job of a thermometer is to react to the environment, right? And now, we all do that. Sometimes we react to the weather, sometimes we react to politics, sometimes we react to how somebody treats us. But in actuality, who controls how we feel? We do, right? We just need that reminder, because ultimately, we are a thermostat, because a thermostat doesn't react, right? It gauges the environment, but then it sets a temperature, much like we could set a vision, or we could set a mission, or we could set an outcome, we could set a goal. And what happens in the environment? The environment changes accordingly. And I really do believe that's so important, is to have that responsibility. It's one of the key tenets to accelerated learning, or just having a fulfilling life. I remember recently, I posted this picture on Instagram. I got to introduce two of my superheroes, modern day superheroes, to dinner, and because they wanted to meet each other. It was Richard Branson and Stan Lee. Now, not Stan Lee, but Stan Lee, he co-created Spider-Man and X-Men and Avengers, right? And we were in the car, and I took this photo. I asked him, Stan, who's your favorite superhero? He created so many. Who's your favorite? He's like, Jim, it's Iron Man. And he's like, Jim, who's your favorite superhero? And you'll see in the photo, he's like, Spider-Man tie. I was like, Spider-Man. And he, without a pause, he goes, Jim, with great power comes great responsibility, in his trademark voice. And I have learning, I grew up with some dyslexia, and I invert things and these kind of challenges. And it's funny because I heard something different. I was like, Stan, you're right. With great power comes great responsibility. And the opposite is also true. With great responsibility comes great power. That when we take responsibility for something, we have great power to make things better. But I find that a lot of human beings, they give away their responsibility or their power, if you will, because they don't want to have to hold something or have to do something, right? And I find that the challenge is, like especially entrepreneurs value their freedom so much. You want to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, right? But I find that if you just do the easy things all the time without discipline, like do the easy thing. Just the easy thing, honestly, is just to procrastinate. The easy thing is to put things off. I'll work out tomorrow, or I'll eat better, whatever it is, right? Whatever their rationale is. But I'm saying if you just do the easy things in life all the time, then life becomes very hard. But if you do the hard things in life, then life becomes easy, right? And so like what we talked about in the beginning, like through struggles comes strength. My two biggest challenges growing up were learning, and because I was the boy with the broken brain, I became very introverted, very shy. So my second biggest challenge in my life was public speaking, because when you feel like you're broken, you don't want to share and connect with a lot of people, right? For fear of being judged. Now, those are my two biggest fears and challenges. And now look what I do for a living. All I do is public speaking on this thing called learning, right? I'm in 10, 20, 30,000 people every single month. And it's just because I feel a moral obligation to share this. And my message to everybody is that you have genius inside of you. It's just nobody has shown you how to be able to let these things out. And so I feel like when we're talking about memory challenges right now, whether it's remembering names or remembering numbers or whatever it is, we're a victim, if you will. I don't like using the word victim, but we're reacting to these forces: digital overload, digital distraction, digital dementia, and digital depression, and it's affecting us in that way. And so my goal is to show people how to unlock the superpowers inside of them to be able to combat the onslaught of these supervillains.
Now, I wanna dwell on this digital dementia just for a little while longer because, within our industry, it's very visual. People look at that instant gratification of that physique that they see there or the amount of weight that's been lifted over there, and they want that gratification immediately. And like you said, it can be a very filtered world that they're looking at. And, there is a lot of comparison. There's a lot of insecurities, especially within this industry, probably more insecurities than the people that you see going and eat at McDonald's, in all honesty. Yeah. So then you have these people on these digital devices all the time. There's the comparison. But one of the problems that I have with a lot of people that I've noticed, like you said, they wake up in the morning and they see that bad news. They become a reaction to it. But I know firsthand that a lot of people take these devices to bed, their phones, their iPads, TV, whatever it may be. Now, if you get that bad message or whatever it is before you go to sleep, you're not going to sleep. Your brain's racing, you're stressed out, your cortisol levels are going up. Now, a lot of people are trying to lose body fat. They're trying to gain muscle. They're trying to improve their health. Can you tell me what are the adverse reactions that people can possibly face by taking these digital devices to bed? Obviously being exposed to the blue light, the raise in cortisol, and how that can, I've seen the statistics of what it's doing with children and how obesity can be rising because of that. Can you share a little bit on your insights of what you've seen and how that is negatively reacting to people, not only physically, but mentally as well?
Absolutely. So we don't know the extent and the damage of all these digital devices are having on our nervous system. We just don't know, because the human brain never before in human history did it have this kind of stimulus, right? And so some of the negative effects you mentioned, right? A lot of people, sleep is so important. If people want to lose weight and such, sleep is so important, because if people aren't sleeping, they're going to retain that, right? Because they're in that mode. And I would say that one of the things that keep us from sleep are these devices. And so one of the reasons why I put a curfew to it is because, well, first of all, the blue light you mentioned, right? Anything with the screen, whether it's your laptop, your iPad, your phone, the emission of blue light actually inhibits the secretion of melatonin, and we know melatonin is key to be able to relax and be able to go to sleep. So that's why we're always like, get off your devices, period. Or if you're going to use it, then make sure your setting is set to be able to filter out that blue light, or you're using apps, to be able to do that, or there's settings on your phone, or you wearing the glasses that you and I were talking about before this conversation. What I would say also is just having those devices in your proximity actually stresses people out. Even when people go to dinner and they have their phone sitting right there, people have more anxiety. Even if someone's not on it, it creates anxiety, just the association to it. I would say also with this device, what I'm concerned about also, besides the dopamine fixes and the reaction and everything else that it's addicting, one of the other challenges with this is we don't know the harmful effects of electromagnetic fields, right? And you have these smart devices and you have them like right by your head all the time in that close proximity. And so people could do their own research. On my show recently, I had a doctor talking about the dangers of EMF and talking about EMF extinction and the rise, multiples of different challenges in terms of health. And I've read recently that over 90% of kids have their phones underneath their pillows,
Wow.
when they're sleeping. And now I'm not even talking about, that they're on airplane mode and everything, but just having the phone there. A lot of our clients, high achievers and such, I tell them just to keep the phone outside the room if at all possible. Like make sure you have your blackout curtains, right? Like when I'm thinking about optimal sleep, we've done many episodes, as I'm sure you have, in terms of optimizing sleep. I'm thinking about light, right? So get rid of the blue light, make sure it's completely dark. They've done studies even where they have just have like a little light, very subtle light right behind somebody's kneecaps, and that will actually affect, because you have photoreceptors here, and actually affect sleep patterns. Even like when you go to hotels, blocking out that alarm clock so you don't see that. So you have light, you have temperature. We know that having it on the colder side is better for sleep. And we also know, besides that, sound has an effect. We don't have to go even into like the different audio tunes that you can listen to, and binaural beats and delta waves and everything else. I'm just saying, having a quiet environment to be able to do that. So there's all kinds of forces that inhibit that. My thing is just not touching technology at nighttime and first thing in the morning. And if people are taking that challenge, their lives, I mean, literally dozens a day do I get tagged in these. People just make it, and it's hard though, because we're addicted to it. Like one of my, really the work that I do is really on the study of habits, right? How do you create new habits? How do you break habits? And two of the episodes we did was with my friend Dr. BJ Fogg, who runs the Stanford University Lab of Influence. And one of his students co-founded Instagram. Now, Instagram, do you know how often the average person opens up Instagram?
I'd hate to think. Probably about,
Yeah.
I don't know, 80 times?
Almost twice that, 150 times I read recently. And 150 times opening that app. Now, just if you're not doing it that many times, because I'm not, think about on average how many other people are doing it, right? To be able to offset that. But that's by design, right? Because just like with any kind of tech, media or anything, they want to keep your eyeballs there because that's how they make money. And so they have these scientists working day and night to make it so that you automatically pick up your phone. This is my challenge with phones, is if you pick it up because you're bored, just out of habit, right? That's the big challenge, because people can't sit quietly in silence anymore. They need that stimulus because they're addicted to it. And my challenge with it is, if your technology is a tool that you use, like a toaster, right? Technology is not good or bad. Like fire could heat your house, or it could burn it down, right? So technology itself is neutral, right? It's just how you use it. But that's what technology is. You're supposed to use it to make your life better. You use technology because it's a tool. But if you're picking up your phone out of boredom or just unconscious because these scientists designed it to be that way, and that technology is using you, then who becomes the tool? You know what I mean? That we become the tool in that equation. And that's my biggest thing, that some people just need to go on a digital fast. They need to do that digital detox. I mean, so many people, you need to, literally, your brain is not set up to be hyper-stimulated like that all the time. And if you're in that space where you need to be creative and you need to be fresh, you need to take time away and have that white space, because that's where your creativity shines. In fact, with technology, the world is going going in this direction for everyone who's watching this, because they say the average graduate can have 8 to 14 different careers, not jobs, like different, because the world's changing so fast. We don't know where the world's going to be 5 to 10 years from now, right? Because of Moore's law and everything. And so the only constant is change. So that's why learning faster is so important. But going back to technology, when we're thinking about our digital devices, everything's being outsourced, right? It's AI, because these are jobs are going, right? Artificial intelligence, like they have programs that could actually do all these things for us, take away jobs. You have automation, right? Machines and everything, or software programs that could take the place of an accountant or whatever. So you have AI, you have automation, and then just to keep the A's, you have Asia, which is like things are being outsourced, for less overseas. So where, as humans, what can't be duplicated by a robot or by a piece of technology, a computer, if you will? I think there's three superpowers that you could bank on. Number one, creativity, right? Like a computer, that'd be a lot more difficult. But human beings, we are creatives, if you will. So creativity. Number two, imagination. And I think they say imagination is more powerful than knowledge, because knowledge is what is, but imagination is what could be. Entrepreneurs, visionary, they have an imagination, a vision for what the impact they're going to have, right? And then the third thing I would say is strategy. And so, but where do you learn these superpowers? Who took a class on creativity? Who took a class on visualization, or on imagination, or on strategy and such? So those are the things that I think that'd be worth investing our time. And even if you pick up your phone, the last thing I'll say on this, if you go and let's say you go to your iPhone, you look at the battery, you click on in settings, you click on the battery, you'll see what your battery is using. You'll see the amount of time you're spending in each of those apps. If you look at your Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, whatever your social platform people happen to be, it might really disturb you to look how many hours. Like I did this with a friend recently, and they had 28 hours a week in the past 7 days on Instagram. And most people, you can't, that's 4 hours a day. I mean, and people wonder like, oh, I have no time to work out, right? Or I have no time to go shopping and meal prep or whatever they need to do. And I'm just saying that the one thing that's equal in this conversation, like everybody has different income, they have different levels of education, they have different connections or whatever, but we all have the same amount of time. That's the one thing human beings all have. We all have 24 hours in a day, 86,400 seconds in a day. And I don't necessarily believe into time management, but I think we could task manage, or at least priority manage. You know what I mean? And I'm always looking at the things that I just did a podcast on the difference between working smart and working hard. And I was in Estonia doing a talk for educators out there. I like to work with teachers and kids. And we were in a power plant, like an actual power plant. And I record the episode, and I do all my episodes right on my phone. They're all only 10, 15 minutes long. And I was like, there's a story about, this is very relevant to everyone who's listening if you want to take your life to the next level. It's an idea of accelerated learning, and it applied towards your memory, towards your time management, if you will, or your task management, and your goal achievement. And basically, there's a story where they had a power plant, and one day the power plant just stops. I mean, dead silent. And the employees are freaking out. The operations manager doesn't know what to do, and they try to fix the problem for a few hours, and they can't do it. So they pick up the phone, they call a local technician, somebody who's in the area. The technician shows up, and the operations manager is like, please help us. We're losing all this money. This is very, very dangerous, and all this things going to happen. Please save us. And the technician walks around the floor for a few minutes, and the floor has all these beams, right? And on the beams, they have these electrical boxes, and he goes to one specific beam, and he goes to one specific electrical box, and he puts an X on the electrical box, and he opens it up, and inside are these bolts, these screws, these wires, and he goes to one specific screw. He takes out a screwdriver, he turns it maybe a half an inch clockwise, and all of a sudden, bam, the entire power plant turns on. And the operations manager is flipping out, saying, thank you so much. You saved the day. You saved our business. It's incredible. How much do I owe you? And the technician looks at him and he says, that'll be $10,000. And the operations manager was just as surprised. And then the other way, saying, are you kidding me? You were here for 5, 10 minutes tops. All you did was turn a screw. Anybody here could have turned that screw. He's like, give me an itemized bill. Break that down. And he's like, no problem. He reaches into his back pocket, takes out a notepad, takes out a pen, he starts writing on it, and he tears it out, gives it to the operations manager, and the operations manager looks at it and says, okay, I understand. And he goes to his desk, takes out a check, writes out a check for $10,000 and gives it to him. And if you look at that, what's on that sheet of paper, that itemized bill, if you will, it says this. It says turning screw, $1. Knowing what screw to turn, $9,999, right? And so what's the message? The message is not that we have a screw loose, right? The message is two things. Number one, knowledge is not only power, knowledge is profit, right? In the economy that we live in right now, it's like this divide of people who know and some people don't know. That's why I think it's so important with the work that you do, whether it's your blog or your show, all your YouTube videos, because you're helping people get that practical wisdom. So that's the difference. I mean, we're paid well for people who know stuff are paid well for their expertise. And so learning how to learn that's why it's so important for everyone for their career and their vocation. But on the other side, the other lesson I got out of it is just this idea of a force multiplier. This idea where it was one screw and it turned everything else on. And I'm not saying that there's a magic bullet for people's memory. Neither do I think there's a magic bullet for somebody's health or their relationship that's going awry or in their business. But what I do know is that there are what they call those lead dominoes, right? These force multipliers, where in the military, force multipliers like the same amount of input, but you get multiple outputs, right? And so what is this idea of it's called a focal point? Like, what is the focal point in your fitness? What is the focal point? What are the focal points in your health? What are those handful of screws that if you turn it, you'll get the highest return, and you'll turn a lot of other things on in that sequence, if you will. And that's what I'm always looking for. And so my work is meeting with high achievers in different areas, whether it's in Hollywood or technology or if it's in education, and really finding out how their genius happens, because I do believe genius leaves clues, that genius can be learned. We're just not taught that if somebody does something magical, that there's always a method behind the magic. So when somebody reads faster, or they can learn languages faster, they can pick up a musical instrument faster, they can walk into a room, meet 30 strangers, and leave saying goodbye to every single one of them, there's something that they're doing that you're not doing. And so my goal is to take that program and then install it into people who don't have that operating system. I mean, I look at the brain as like hardware and software. It's just we update our phones, every 2-3 years? But when's the last time you upgraded your mind, the operating system of your mind, right? And you talk about, when I watch your videos, you talk a lot about that in terms of people's mindset, in terms of their beliefs, their conscious thoughts that they have. But who's having this conversation with people on a regular basis, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I do tell people a lot of the time that, if I'm doing a seminar, I'll say, like, how many of you had your oil changed in your car this year? Hands go up. Or had your tires changed the last couple of years? Hands go up. How many of you actually had a food allergy test or blood test? Nobody, And I'm like, well, this is very important. And I'm really glad that I'm having this conversation with you, because this isn't something that I've spoken about too much in regards to the brain. Now, I originally moved here to Boise in 2007 as the editor-in-chief of bodybuilding.com. And I learned a lot from Ryan DeLuca, who was the founder of bodybuilding.com. He had a book reading club within bodybuilding.com because he wanted to entice people to read more. And if anybody gave a book report, he'd pay them $50 or $70. And he'd also pay for everybody's gym membership if you proved that you went there 3 times a week, because he knew that would help with the blood flow to the brain as well. And I remember I'd get in his car and, I'm thinking, what is this guy listening to? Because he'd have his books, his audio books on like ×2 or ×3. And I'm like, wow, this is very impressive. And it's obviously worked for him now. He's moved on to another company that he founded 3 years ago called Black Box VR. This is virtual weight training. And I went and he's going to be setting up the first gym in San Francisco in December of this year. And I had a workout on one of those pieces of equipment. I was a little bit suspicious of it, but once I got off it, I thought, wow, that was awesome. Because it's kind of like a game, but you're getting such a good workout, you know. Heart rate was up to like 90% max. And it's really, really good. But this guy still thinks, you know, is just trying to optimize his brain as much as he possibly can. Now, for the listeners that are tuning into this now, are there any simple steps that you can recommend for them to improve their learning? Because maybe they are picking up a book and going, oh, wow, I just read that page, but now I have to read it again, and get frustrated and give up. Because a lot of people will come to me and say, well, I'm not motivated, thinking that it's something that it's a commodity that you can pick off the tree. Well, no, you have it. You just need to optimize it. Much like you have books, I have books. Yeah, they're all useless unless you actually apply it. So how do you teach people to retain this and learn and become focused and become better learners at learning?
I love this. So what I would recommend to everyone who's listening here is to, if it's possible, to take notes on this. What I'm going to do is just rapid fire. And this is all like nuts and bolts. And what I would also think about as you're going through this is think about somebody who you wish was listening to this right now. It could be your significant other, it could be your kids, it could be, you know, somebody on your team, and have them in mind and think about how you're going to explain this to them. Because I believe when we learn with the intention of teaching somebody else, we get to learn it twice, right? We get better focus, we take better notes, and we own that information. So I'm going to do just rapid fires. Just stream of consciousness, some of the brain hacks that I feel would help people have an advantage. So I want everyone just to remember this word FAST. When we're thinking about this word FAST, F-A-S-T, it's an acronym. And so if you want to learn any subject or skill faster, just think about one. Maybe it's music, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's muscle building, maybe it's martial arts, right? Maybe it's Mandarin. Just pick something. And just let's see how we can apply the FAST method to it. So these are principles to accelerated learning. The F stands for, in FAST, forget. And you're like, Jim, you're a memory expert. Why are you telling me to forget? How is that going to help me learn faster? Well, I find that a lot of people don't learn a subject or skill faster because they feel like they know it already. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I've been doing this for so long. And what keeps you from learning something new is your belief that you already know it. And so it's cliche, but like all cliches, there's some truth to it, that your mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's opened, right? And so temporarily forget what you know about a subject so you can learn something brand new. And I like to do that when I'm listening to podcasts or I'm reading, because I want to see their paradigm and their principles, and then I can compare it later on to what I believe is true, and I can make a good decision based on my own reality. The other things I would say forget while we're talking about forget about let's say situational things. A lot of people don't learn faster because they're splitting their attention. They're listening to that podcast, but they're also trying to do other work and check emails and do other things. And if you're trying to do 3 or 4 things at once, we already talked about multitasking, it's a myth. You can't do it. But at best, let's say it gives you 25% of your resources and your presence to actually pay attention. That's why you're learning it slow. And what I would say is practically when you have things come up and you really want to study, just write them down. And then that way your mind could release it and know it's going to be there when you come back to it, right? The last thing I would say is forget. Besides what you know about a subject, besides what's going on in the world, forget about temporarily your what's possible. Forget about your limitations, if you will, because most people suffer from what they call learned helplessness, right? Here's an example. You wonder why the elephant that's huge, right, at the circus doesn't just run away because it pulled a whole tent down, right? But it doesn't because it was trained. Since it was a baby, that elephant's been tied with that same rope to that same stake in the ground. And in the beginning, it would try to get its sovereignty, try to get its freedom by pulling and pulling and pulling. But after days or weeks go by, it learns something. It learns that it's helpless. And then later on, when it grows really big and strong, and it can easily pull down, the circus tent we talked about, it doesn't because it's mine. It's not that, right? And if you're like, people listen like, what does that have to do with memory and speed reading and everything? It's just what do we get imprinted on when we were a child? about what's possible, right? People are so scared of failure. I mean, don't you find that one of the things that keeps us from applying knowledge is people are scared of looking bad, right? They're living everyone else's life. Here's the thing. You could go broke buying into the opinions and expectations of everybody else, right? Your family, your friends. I mean, people must be who listen to this can relate. You're like, oh, you're listening to another podcast, you're watching another YouTube video on this, you're going to, why are you doing, why are you doing another event, right? Because often it's the people that care about us the most that pull us down because we give up our power, right? Because we care about how we look. And that's the thing. Like, you would never take a child who tried to walk 3 or 4 times and you're just like, oh, don't try this anymore. You're just failing. You know what I mean? But we do that when we take a singing lesson or we take a marketing and we're just not good at it the first time, right? But I have a belief that there's no such thing as failure, just failure to learn. You know, we just get feedback, right? And we adjust accordingly. And people think failure is this big thing and failure is the opposite of success. We all know failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. Right, and that's where we learn, and we can adjust, and we can pivot, and so on. So and just make sure that you can hear me, okay, Chris?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. I work with a lot of actors, and one of these gentlemen is Jim Carrey. We're preparing for one of his roles, and we're in his kitchen, and we're making guacamole. And I asked him this question I like to ask people. It's like, you know, what motivates you? Why do you do what you do? Because at a certain point, you know, the money, you know, just... And he's like, Jim, I do what I do. I act like a complete fool in movies and on television because I'm extreme, you know, extreme, if you will, because I want to give people permission to be themselves. You know, I want to act like a complete fool because if by doing that, if somebody else becomes free from other people's concern, then I did my job. And, you know, then we don't realize the pressure we have. You know, I feel like, Chris, that people can only be happy with two things, like truly fulfilled. And number one is you need to know who you are. Right. I think self-awareness is a superpower. You know, we go through life, we go through troubles, whether it's in relationships, in our health, or whatever it is, because difficult times could diminish us, they could define us, or they could develop us. Right. And we could choose, we decide ultimately. But I find we go through these situations because that's how we grow, that's how we get wise, and that's part of like our human experience. So number one, we need to have the curiosity to know ourselves. But once we get to know who we are, then we need to have the courage to be ourselves. You know what I mean? The curiosity to know ourselves and then having the courage to be ourselves. And that's a totally different game, right? Where we have people are congruent. I believe, I was mentioning I work with actors, right? And I was recently on set with Will Smith. And I help actors speed read scripts, remember lines faster, be focused and present on, you know, in front of camera and such. And, well, interesting, going back to reading, you were talking about, I did an Insta story with him, and I was just like, what are 2 things you do every day to keep your brain active? And he's like, Jim, I do 2 things. I run and I read. And I was like, that's interesting. He does something, he exercises his mind and his body every single day. But we were on a set on a previous movie, it was a superhero movie, and it was shooting at night at 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And I was just like, this is crazy. 3 a.m. in the morning. It's like, how do you get ready? Like, you're waiting all this time for a director to say you're up, and like, how do you get ready? And I was like, he's like, Jim, I don't have to get ready. I stay ready. And I'm like, oh, geez, okay. That there's a difference in congruency and alignment when we're doing that, because I believe with all of us, like when people see me on stage and I do these things, it's just, I don't have to prepare. It's just, this is the life that, like with you, like the stuff that you teach, it's like, that's the life you live, right? So you're just documenting it and sharing it with other people, right? So it's not forced, it's natural because you're congruent and aligned, right? Everything's lined up in terms of your thoughts, your actions, your behaviors. And I believe that that's power congruency, that the life we live are the lessons we teach, you know, especially to other people. And so going back to this in terms of preparation, I would say do the work. And if you want to be an accelerated learner, first forget who you are, or what you know, so you could be something better. A stands for active, and this is so huge. A lot of people are forgetful or they're distracted because the school system that we grew up with taught us to be passive. It was like, sit quietly by yourself, don't talk to your neighbor, just consume whatever the teacher is giving you, right? And I would say that learning, like life, is not a spectator sport. That you can't teach somebody how to ride a bike in a classroom or by reading a book, right? That people have to be active, rolling up your sleeves, getting involved, taking notes, asking questions, experimenting with it, and all of that. So being active. How can people be more active with their learning? The S in FAST stands for state. And this is one of the most important principles of accelerated learning, is this: all learning is state dependent. All learning is state dependent. And when I say state, what does it mean? I'm mostly talking about a snapshot of your mind and your body, like the mood or the emotion. If you want to know what long-term memory is, it's this: information is forgettable. Information is ordinary. You don't retain information. But information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. And to prove this, all I have to do is ask somebody, like, is there a song or a fragrance or a food that could take you back to when you were a kid? Of course, right? You can smell a perfume or a cologne or eat a certain food or something that's baking. It can take you back decades, right? Because information by itself is forgettable, it's boring. But information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. And to prove it one more level above that, think about school, right? We just talked about education, and it is not a slight against teachers. I have the huge respect for teachers. My mother became a school teacher, a special ed teacher, because she didn't know how to help me. Right, so I feel like they work incredibly hard, but it's a system issue when it comes to education. But going back to here, think about like when in school, what was the primary emotion most people felt in school? Most people would say that they were just bored, right? They were just bored. Half the room is bored, the other half is confused, right? But boredom, on a scale of 0 to 10, what's boredom? 0, right? So I said information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. Information times emotion. If the emotion level is boredom or 0, anything times 0 is what? It's just 0. And that's why we don't retain. People don't remember the periodic table, right? Or what number of presidents, all this stuff that we learned back in school. And I would say it's because the state you learn something in is how you code it. There's 3 parts to memory. There's an encoding process, there's a storage process, and the retrieval process. But if you encode it in a bored state, 2 things happen. Number 1, you won't retain it. But even if you do, you're not going to be motivated to use it because you learned it in that crummy state, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so the state you learn something is also the state you're motivated to be able to apply it, which we said is the whole thing, right? I mean, that's exactly, where the rubber meets the road. And so I would say that's where you're getting your mileage, right? And so S is state, and going back to this, who controls our state? Who controls how we feel? We do. Because we know that anyone right now, I'm asking everybody, on a scale of 0 to 10, how do you feel? And people can be honest, shout out loud whatever that number is. It could be 2, it could be 5, it could be 7. People go, hip hip hooray, I'm at 10, whatever it is. But if, let's say you're a 6, all you have to do is just ask yourself, how I feel like a 6 right now. What would need to happen in order for me to feel like an 8? You know what I mean? Just ask that new question, and who controls that? Is it really the weather or somebody on the outside? We know it's us, because how do you change how you feel? You could change your posture. You could put a smile on your face. You could think about different thoughts. So we control it, but we're in this mass hypnosis that we're at the effect. Like everybody in the morning, they look at their to-do list. Why doesn't anybody have like a to-feel list? Like why would you just plan out all the things you need to do and not have a plan for like how you want to feel today? Because ultimately, everything you want to do is you want to do it because it changes the way you feel anyway. So and also, why not have it going back before that? What about a to-be list? Like instead of asking yourself when you're stressed and you're overloaded and you're overwhelmed, oh, what do I need to do? That's a great question. Yes, but what if you ask yourself, who do I need to be at this moment? That's a totally higher level question, right? Being confident, being secure, whatever it is. And then the behavior happens naturally, right? And so my thing here is that genius leaves clues. The F stands for forget. The A stands for being active. The S is state. And finally, the T I started with stands for teach. That if you want to learn something faster, learn with the intent, because intent matters. And when you teach something, you learn to teach it, you get to learn it twice. Because I still feel like the best students, are the best teachers, and the best teachers are the best students. So you learn because you want to be able to, for your own benefit, you want to know how to apply it to your life. But the other reason you learn is so you could help somebody else with their life. And so I would apply that model like towards everything you want to learn faster. Now, just very quickly though, part of it is software. Like, in our podcast and our online programs, we teach people how to read faster, how to learn languages, how to give speeches without notes, all that stuff. But there's also hardware. And that's why I could appreciate, the work people do with nutrition and physiology and sleep, right? Making that a priority, because all that affects the hardware, right? I could teach people how to read faster, but if they didn't sleep the night before, how good is their focus the next day? How good is their memory the next day? If you don't sleep the night before, how are you even processing and being able to make good decisions, right? So they go hand in hand, right? And so here's what we found in studies. I do trainings at the Cleveland Clinic. I train at the Cleveland Clinic for Brain Health, the Center for Brain Health. I train their doctors, their caregivers, their researchers, if you will. We know that 1/3 of your memory, for example, is predetermined by genetics and biology. Right? Now, some people say that actually you have full control, but at least 2/3 at least in your control or influence. So what are the 2/3 that affect like that potential? Well, I narrowed it down to 10 things. And I just want to just quickly give people the 10 things that I do to be able to activate my brain. And this is working more on a hardware level, because, software is the steps, if you will. These are the 10 things that I know is going to have a positive impact on your cognitive performance, on your focus, and on your memory, on your ability to think faster. So I would say 10 things, and people don't even have to write this down. I will teach them how to memorize this. Okay. So imagine you have to give a TED talk and give like 10 points to your speech, whatever it happens to be. Like, you don't want to do it verbatim, but I train a lot of the actors to memorize scripts, but I also train a lot of, TED speakers actually how to give their 18-minute talks, at least to be able to memorize them. So 10 keys for unlocking what I call your quick brain. Number 1 is a good brain diet. All right. Now, we know that because you are what you eat, because here, what you eat matters, especially for your gray matter. All right. So there's 10 foods. I did a whole podcast episode on my top 10 favorite brain foods. And I teach people how to memorize it in a different way so people can listen to that episode. But basically, I'm thinking about avocados. I'm thinking about blueberries, or what they call brain berries. I'm thinking about broccoli. I like, a good oil, because your brain is mostly fat. I'm thinking about eggs, which are really good, neuroprotective. I would think about green leafy vegetables. It's number 6. 7, wild salmon, right? The DHA is so very good. I would turmeric. I have like a golden tea sometimes, right, with almond milk and such, because turmeric lowers inflammation. I would say for number 9, there are a number of ones, but walnuts. It's kind of interesting because walnut looks like a human brain, so it's really easy to remember. Certain foods. I don't know if this is science, but definitely as a mnemonic memory device, certain foods look like the organ they're supporting. So if you cut like a carrot and you look at it from the side, it looks like an eye, so it's good for eyes. And if you look at tomato, you cut it, as the 4 chambers like the heart and so on. So sign of nature, signature sign of nature. The walnuts look like an egg. And number 10, I would say dark chocolate for those people. Like the darker the better. Because what's good for your mood tends to be good for your mind also as well. But regardless, for me, I guess get a food sensitivity test to make sure that everything works well with me. So number 1, good brain diet. Number 2, killing ants is actually clinically proven to be good for your brain. Ants is a term I got from Dr. Daniel Amen. Automatic negative thoughts. We talked about that because your mind, people grossly underestimate the power of their thoughts and their self-talk in their mind. And what I would say is that, like right now, when people are listening to this, you have hundreds of millions of neurons being fired right now and wired together, and your mind is never the same. Oliver Wendell Holmes said a person's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions, right? And so those ideas change your brain, and it's so powerful that if people really understood that they wouldn't say anything or think anything they didn't want to be true. And that's how powerful your mind really is. And I would say also, talking about the power of imagination on a side note, there was this study done. I was giving a talk in Sardinia, which is one of the blue zones, right, for longevity. I was talking about this study done in 1979, and Ellen Langer they called it the counterclockwise study. And she was in a nursing home, a senior center, and noticed in 1979, this is not the environment you want to spend your late years, right? And she took 8 men and put them into a monastery. And but there's something special about this monastery. She decorated it with her team, so it didn't look like 1979, it looked like 1959. And so she took all the mirrors out so the guys couldn't see themselves, and they put like Time magazine there, but it was from 1959, right? All the TV programs in black and white was in 1959. All the news was going on, right? And before they put them in there, they got out of the vans and they were walking in with canes and such, and they did tests, and so they tested them on their acuity, like with their senses, how good their vision was, how good their sense of hearing, and so on. They also did strength tests, and they also did cognitive tests, how good their focus and memory and such. And to abbreviate this, they also did a control group where they took 8 guys, put them in another room in the monastery, but didn't change the environment. They just said, just reminisce like it was 20 years ago. That was it. Come back 1 week later, just 1 week later, and they found the group where they changed everything around had this life to them, right? But what was measurable was their sense of sight. Their visual acuity was stronger. They had better sense of sight. They could hear better, right, on hearing tests. They were physically stronger just being in that environment, and their cognitive performance was better, meaning their memory and their focus. In fact, they took pictures of them before they walked in and then right afterwards, just a week apart, and took a focus group, not knowing anything about the study, and they showed them the 2 pictures side by side, and they asked them one question: which was the younger person? Which one was the shot? Which photo was the older, if you will, shot earlier? And 100% of them chose the recent photo, the one where they walked out afterwards. And this is just going back to the power of imagination. We've heard all these studies about power of imagination where they take 3 groups of people, have them do free throws, and then they take the 3 groups and say, okay, the first group, I want you to practice an hour a day. The second group, I want you to imagine you're practicing an hour a day, just that as you're successfully throwing these free throws. And the third group don't do anything. They come back after X amount of time. Group A, all improved, obviously, let's say 28%, if you will, because practice makes what? Practice makes progress, right? They take the second group who just use their imagination, or they go to the third group and who didn't touch anything. Same, no gain, right? No practice, no progress. But they took that second group, Group B, who just practiced in their mind with imagination, and they scored like 27% increase, 1% less than people actually went out to practice. Because here's what we understand about the human mind. Your mind doesn't know the difference between something you vividly imagine and something that's real. And you want to take this to heart because they've done studies where they'll have a dog walk, they'll hook people up to brain sensing device, and they'll have a dog walk in, see what parts of their brain light up. They'll take the dog out. They'll say, imagine that dog walking in again. And the same parts of their brain will light up because you don't know the difference between something you vividly imagine and something that's real. And we know this because we react to dreams. We react to what scary movie physiologically, right? We start sweating, our heart starts beating because the imagination is power. And so I would say, like, what are you imagining on a regular basis? And most people are imagining what they fear, and that's why they tend to, quote unquote, attract it. And I'm not talking about the law of attraction, but I'm talking about the law of action. And the action that we're doing is rehearsal, because that's why they say a coward dies 1,000 deaths and a courageous person just one, because that coward is rehearsing everything that they're fearing over and over and over again. And what they're doing, like I'm saying, reviewing and rehearsing, is that's the neurological pathways that are lighting up. So they're more likely to do it because they're practicing it in their mind, right? That's why we have to be so conscious of our thoughts. So number 1, good brain diet. Number 2, killing ants, automatic negative thoughts. Number 3, I'll go through the rest really fast. 3 is exercise, right? This is your superpower. We know that we know the human brain, the primary function of the human brain is to control your movement, right? That's why primarily we have a brain, but it's not a one-way street, if you will. It's not a brain-body connection. We know the brain is part of your body, right? But it's not a mind-body connection. It's a body-mind connection that as your body moves, your brain grooves. Across the board, when people exercise and are active, they'll do better on mental acuity, they'll have better focus, they'll have a better memory. Whatever's good for their heart, it's gonna be good for their head. Even when people are exercising, they create BDNF, right? Brain-derived neurotrophic factors, which is like the fertilizer for neurogenesis and neuroplasticity to help you create new brain cells, right? Even when people when they listen to your show or my show, and they're on a treadmill or on something rhythmic, they'll learn it faster, right? And so huge, and we could go for hours and hours on this, but there's certain exercises people can do that just improve their brain performance. Exercise is amazing. Ballroom dancing, anything where you have to put your mind into your muscle, very strong. But that's number 3. Number 4, and again, these are all common sense, but common sense is not common practice. I don't think anyone's going to debate any of these 10. Number 4, brain nutrients. And I would say that if you're not getting it from your diet, I always prefer diet, but if you're not getting it from your diet, then how can you ever have a perfect diet? Then you supplement. And so, and you made clear, you've done episodes on this, like in terms of brain vitamins, nootropics, and so on. So you can supplement this. I think one of the most important ones is omega-3s, like DHA. Absolutely. So that's number 4. Number 5, positive peer group. What do I mean by that? The people you spend time with affects your brain. It just does. Who you spend time with is who you become. Because now, you heard that as cliche. From a neurological standpoint, I'll give you one reason. Because you have these things called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are what they call your imitation neurons. It creates empathy. It's when you see something, you could feel like you're doing it. Like you're watching sports, you could kind of feel the motions in your body. Those are your mirror neurons. That's why kids learn so quickly. They have these mirror neurons. They're not doing what you say, they're doing what you do. Right? That's how kids learn. And what I'm concerned about is who you spend time with, because they say if you spend time with 9 broke people, you're going to be the 10th, right? Because what you're imitating are their behaviors, their habits, their beliefs, and their values, right? And so who you spend time with is who you become, because it's not just your biological networks or your neurological networks, it's your social networks. Like whether or not somebody smokes has less to do with their biology and more to do whether or not their friends smoke. That's going to have more of an influence, right? So be careful who you... And what I was talking about before, like, your friends, your family are some of the people that could potentially hold you back the most because you care how they think, right? And so you live to their expectations. And so, that's the phrase that says you don't live up to the expectations of others, you fall to the level of your training. That's why I think conditioning and training is so very, very important. But expectations of others sometimes have a big influence. What I would say is you can love your family, but if they're holding you back, they don't have to influence you, and you make a conscious choice, right? Because you're a thermostat. Number 6, clean environment. I don't have to go into it, but your external world is a reflection of your internal world, so it's good for your brain. When you clean your desktop, and you know this, when you clean what's on your laptop, you clean the desktop, all of a sudden you have clarity of thought, right? Because your external world reflects your internal world. Number 7, sleep. That's a given. We already talked about that, but I would say 3 things cognitively why it's important. We know that people don't build muscles when they work out, right? They're tearing it down. They build it when they rest. Same thing with your mental muscles. And so I would say 3 reasons why you want to sleep. Number 1, it's where you consolidate short to long-term memory. That's why when people pull all-nighters at school and everything else, that's a big mistake, right? That you need to be able to sleep. Number 2, it's where you clean plaque out of your brain. That the latest research is saying can lead to dementia and some brain aging challenges. When you sleep, your sewage system, goes into play and you start cleaning that out. So you need to sleep. But a 3rd reason, a fun reason why you want to sleep is because from a cognitive standpoint, it allows you to dream. What does dreaming have to do with anything? People do not realize this, but in our culture, a lot of inventions, art, music, literature came from dream states. So, for example, Mary Shelley came up with Frankenstein in her dream. Paul McCartney came up with the song Yesterday in his dream. The periodic table came to a chemist in his dream. Right? Elias Howe created the sewing machine in his dream. I can just go on and on and on. So what science is showing right now is when you're learning all day, or you're, you're working on your career, your business, whatever, your brain doesn't shut off at night. If anything, it's more active at night. But the problem is when people wake up in the morning. Like one of the most popular episodes we did on our show was my morning routine. There's 10 things I do every single morning to jumpstart my brain, because if you want to win the day, as they've said, you need to win the first hour of the day. And so there are 10 things I do, but the very first thing I do in the morning is I remember my dreams. So I teach a 6-step process on how to remember dreams, because what are you dreaming about late at night that could be solving your biggest challenges or building a business or taking the next level of fitness, but you're forgetting your dream first thing in the morning, right? So things you can do to lock it in. So sleep is important. Number 8, brain protection. And what do I mean by that? I suffered from a number of traumatic brain injuries. You got to protect your brain. So if you're doing extreme sports, you're playing football, or wear a helmet, right? So that's very important. But not just protecting it that way, protecting it from electromagnetic fields and everything I was saying. Don't sleep with your phone underneath your pillow because you don't know what it's doing, right? And then finally, 9 and 10. 9 is new learnings. New learnings. And I'd be preaching to the choir because people are still listening to this right now. The key is name of the game is neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. Neurogenesis means you could create new brain cells the day you die. Neuroplasticity is saying you create new connections in your brain. That's new thoughts, new learnings. The key to create neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, 2 things: novelty and nutrition. Just like building a muscle, you got to give it novelty, you got to work it out, and then you got to feed that muscle, with nutrition. Same thing with your mental muscles. You got to give it novelty, something new to learn, and also then you got to feed it the nutrients, right? And then obviously if the rest. So new learnings. Actually, there was a study done on longevity. This is really interesting. It was about these nuns. These nuns were living really long lifespans. And it was actually on the cover of Time magazine. And they wanted to find out what's the key to their longevity. Why are they living so long? The researchers, and I'm summarizing this really abbreviated, half of it had to do with their emotional gratitude and faith, but the other half had to do, they were lifelong learners. Throughout their entire life, they were always learning. And because of it, it added years to their life, but also life to their years, which is just as important, right? So new learnings. And finally, number 10, key to unlocking what I call your quick brain, is stress management. And I say this because this is the elusive obvious, but most people, they don't realize how much stress they're under. They don't realize it till they're on a beach somewhere or they're getting a massage or something, because it's like a fish doesn't see water because it's in the water all the time. We don't know, you don't know how much stress you're under. Emotional stress, technology stress, financial stress, emotional, relationship stress, environmental stresses. And what practice do you have to cope with stress? So what are you doing, to be able to lower your stress levels, because it affects your brain. Chronic stress, we talked about, shrinks your brain. And so what are you doing that brings you joy and relaxation, puts you in a parasympathetic, mode to be able to, recover and rejuvenate. And so for me, I have a float tank. I do this sensory deprivation tank where I just kind of float there for an hour. I do my meditation. I get my body work done. What do you do to remove stress? So those are 10 keys for unlocking your quick brain. Now, I promised everybody just a really fast technique on how to memorize those 10 forward and backwards. I'll give it to you right now. This is the interactive part. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes if it's safe to do so. Don't do this if you're working out. But if you can take a break, it makes sense. Or if you're driving, obviously don't do it. Use your common sense. But you don't have to close your eyes. It just helps you to focus a little bit. I'm going to teach everybody really fast, and we can end with this, a 2,500-year-old mnemonic technique, back where before they had printing presses and teleprompters, how did Greek orators, Greek poets memorize their speeches, right? And so this is attributed to Simonides, who's a Greek poet 2,500 years ago. And the story goes, he was giving a poetry reading, and when he was done, he left the building, and something really tragic happened. The building collapsed, and it killed everybody that was there inside that building, inside that room. And because he was the sole survivor, he had the responsibility of coming back and helping their families identify their loved ones. And he was able to do it, though, because he remembered where they were all sitting. And aren't you the same way? You could go to a dinner and you remember who is to your left and who is your right. And we find that humans remember where things are because, in fact, when you forget someone's name, how do you remember it? You're like, what's the first question you ask? Where do I know this person? Right? You ask where because the context gives you the content a lot of times. And so we thrive on that because as hunter and gatherers, think about it. Your survival is, you didn't need to memorize numbers and words and all these things. You need to remember where things were. Like as a hunter, you need to remember where the food was, right? Where the clean soil is, where's the enemy tribe, where's the clean water. That was your survival. So we place information in space. And so this technique is about taking places that you are familiar with, maybe your home, maybe your body, maybe your office, and taking the information that you want to remember and taking the first thing you want to remember and putting it in the first place. Taking the second thing you want to remember and putting it in the second place of your home. And if you ever found yourself saying in the first place this, in the second place that, and in the third place that, that's where that language came from. This 2,500-year-old memory technique. We don't use that memory technique anymore. We will now, moving forward, but we use that language. All right. So I'm going to take a place because everyone's in different places right now. That I'm going to take people to my office. All right, and I'm going to take 10 places in my office. And so I'm going to show you it works in places you're not even familiar with. And I'm going to take each of the 10 brain tips and put the first one in the first place, the second one in the second place. So we can do this together. So everyone take a deep breath. Remember, the A in fast was active. So this is where the work comes from, right? And so take a deep breath, exhale. If it's safe, close your eyes, but you don't need to. And I want you to imagine you're flying into Westchester Airport, where our office is in New York. It's the suburbs of New York City. And you land in the Westchester Airport, car picks you up, and you get in the back seat. And even if you can't imagine it, imagine you can imagine it. Car picks you up, and you go to, you're in suburbia, there's trees everywhere. You go to a glass building, and I'm going to name the first place. The first place is the parking lot, all right? The parking lot. So what's the first place? You could say it out loud. First place is the parking lot. Good. And then when you get out of the parking lot, I want you to see the first brain tip, and it's a good brain diet. So when you're out, get out of the parking lot, I want you to imagine a buffet of good brain foods. So you see your avocados, you see your blueberries, you see your wild salmon, you see your eggs, right? You see your green leafy vegetables, all a good brain diet. And I want you to imagine making a good brain like smoothie. You're putting the chocolate and the avocados and the water and the green leafy vegetables into a smoothie. And don't put the wild salmon in, probably wouldn't really do well. Okay, good brain diet. From there, there's a waterfall. It creates like a moat around the building, and you have to cross a bridge. So the second place is the bridge. So what's the second place? Say it out loud. Bridge. And then as you're crossing the bridge, you want to remember killing ants. Automatic negative thoughts. But imagine you're stepping on all these ants. Ants everywhere on the bridge. Step on. You would never do that, but you're doing it to help you remember, because your mind doesn't remember ordinary, it remembers extraordinary. Killing ants. See and feel yourself killing those ants. Now you might be thinking, Jim, this is so childish. Who are the fastest learners? Children, right? How fast can they learn a language? How fast can they learn a musical instrument? Because they harness their imagination. We said imagination is power. So from there, you walk into the building. The third place is you get into the elevator. So what's the elevator? Number 3. Third place is the elevator. And when you go in there, I want you to remember the third brain tip, exercise. Exercise. So you're doing your favorite exercise with Kris in the elevator. All right, everyone imagine that. Whatever your favorite exercise is, with Kris in the elevator. And you're getting a good sweat. You come out of the elevator, the fourth place is the hallway. So say out loud, what's the fourth place? Say it out loud. Hallway. And you want to remember the fourth brain tip, which are brain nutrients. Brain nutrients. So I want you to imagine, as you're walking through the hallway, all these bottles of brain nutrients are coming at you, like maybe big bottles, and you're jumping over them like you're Indiana Jones or Donkey Kong, Lara Croft, or whatever, and you're jumping over these big bottles of brain nutrients. So you see your DHAs, you see all your nootropics, whatever they are, brain nutrients. And then you open up the door to the office. Immediately to the left is the fifth place. The fifth place is the closet. So what's the fifth place? Say it out loud.
The closet.
Closet. And you go in there, and there's your positive peer group. You open up the closet, and there's your positive peer group. Your happy friends are all in the closet. All your happy friends are in the closet right now. And just imagine they're really happy. They're putting smiley stickers all over you. Your positive peer group is in the closet, of all places. You close the closet door, you go to sixth place. The sixth place is the receptionist. So say out loud, everybody, what's the sixth place? Say it out loud.
Receptionist.
And you want to remember clean environment. So I want you to imagine the receptionist is cleaning the environment. Cleaning the environment. Vacuuming, mopping, sweeping, bleaching everything Everything has its place, cleaning and organizing the environment. Behind the receptionist is the seventh place, and that is the fish tank. The fish tank. What's the seventh place? Say it out loud for your verbal memory.
Fish tank.
And the seventh brain tip is sleep. So you're going to be sleeping with the fishes. The fishes are sleeping. And I want you to make this nonsensical. Make it illogical. Maybe you see Nemo and Dory, and they're dressed in their pajamas. The fish are in bunk beds, and they are snoring. The fish are sleeping in their pajamas, snoring, and making bubbles in the fish tank. Great. You're almost done. You go to the eighth place. The eighth place, maybe you're taking our speed reading class, and the eighth place is a door. Door. It's a door to the classroom. So what's the eighth place? It's the what?
The door.
Door. And it's locked. So how do you open it? You put on your eighth brain tip, which is a helmet. Remember, brain protection. Always wear a helmet. You put on the helmet, and then you headbutt the door open, and it shatters, splinters everywhere. So you wear the helmet to remind you of brain protection, and you hit the door, and you open it up. In front of the classroom is the ninth place, and that's the whiteboard. The whiteboard. What's the ninth place? Say it out loud.
Whiteboard.
Whiteboard. And I'm there, and I'm writing the words, next brain tip, new learnings. So I want you to imagine I'm there, I'm your instructor, and I'm writing the words new learnings on the whiteboard with a marker. And I want you to imagine the marker is your favorite color, your very favorite color. So just think about and picture, imagine, even if you can't imagine it and picture it perfectly, just imagine you could, your favorite color. And it's saying new learnings. And maybe you see the cover of the Time magazine with a nun on it or something to remind you of new learnings. Or maybe your favorite books on there also. And finally, on the side of the classroom are all these bonsai trees. You know these plants, these Japanese plants? Bonsai trees. What's the 10th place? Say it out loud.
Bonsai trees.
And on these bonsai trees, I want you to remember stress management. Stress management. And so whatever reduces your stress, maybe you're getting a massage or body work on the bonsai trees. And maybe you're meditating on the bonsai trees. Whatever the stress management is for you, put that on the bonsai trees. All right. Now open up your eyes. You are the memory expert. You are the memory expert, the memory coach. You are on stage. You're talking to a group of people. You need to remember, maybe you're giving a TED Talk. You need to remember the 10 keys for unlocking your quick brain. And now, the challenge as a speaker, it's kind of like this. I don't know if you experienced this, Kris, but like you're talking to a group of people, or you're doing a Facebook Live or whatever, and somebody asks you a question, you go to answer it, and then you come back and you're like, oh, where was I? You know, where did I just leave off, right? Here you know exactly where you leave off because you're just on this journey, right? In this location, these 10 places. And so what I want everyone to do with this location method is go to the very first place. What was the first place in the journey? It was what?
The parking lot.
The parking lot. And what quick tip does that brain tip does that remind you of? It reminds you of what, everybody? And I want everybody to do this out loud with us. What's the first brain tip? It's like you get out of the parking lot and there's the what? All the brain food. So it's just to remind you of good brain food. Good brain diet is waiting for you. You're making the smoothie without the salmon, right? And then from there, you cross the second place. What's the second place on the on this journey? The bridge. And then the second place, the bridge. And automatically, when you think about the bridge, what's the second brain tip? You're killing all the what?
The ants.
The ants. Automatic negative thoughts. See, that's number 2. Then you go inside the building and you get inside the third place to go up. The third place is the what?
The elevator.
Elevator. And what's everyone doing in the elevator? We are all what?
All exercising with me.
Exercising. Yes, exercising with Kris. And then so that's to remind you of exercise number 3. You get out of the elevator. Immediately outside the elevator is the fourth place, which is the hallway, right? And then what's rolling down the hallway? What are bottles of what?
What was it? Bottle of was it nutrients, nootropics?
Yeah, all the nootropics. Yeah. So all the nutrients, the brain vitamins or the brain nutrients and the nootropics. That's to remind you number 4. Then you open a door, and immediately to the left is the closet, right? And you open up the closet, and who's in the closet? Those are all your what?
Was that my friends?
Yeah, all your friends. These are your friends, your peer group, if you will. So it's your happy friends, it's your peer group. That's to remind you of number 5. be conscious of your friends. Number 6 is you go over to the receptionist. And what's the receptionist busy doing?
She's cleaning.
Cleaning. And that's to remind you of a clean environment, right? Clean environment's good for your brain. That's number 6. The 7th place behind the receptionist was the beautiful tropical what?
Is it the bowl, the fish bowl? Was that right?
Yeah. So you have all the fishes there, and what are the fishes doing? They are what? They're wearing their pajamas and they are sleeping. Yeah, to remind everybody, number 7 brain tip, make sure everybody gets sleep. Then you go to the 8th place, which is the door, but then the door is locked, right? And so everyone put on their what? They put on their helmet to remind you of brain protection. Always wear a helmet when you're doing things. And you can imagine your favorite sports team on it also as well. And then you get into the room, and then immediately up front is the whiteboard, right? And I'm there, and I'm writing these words on there: new learnings, right? New learnings are your favorite color. Remind you to always learn new things, good for your brain. And then finally, on the side of the classroom are all these Japanese plants, right? These bonsai trees. And what's happening on the bonsai trees? What are people getting done on the bonsai trees?
That one stumped me. That last one has stumped me.
Yeah, and so this is good too, because we learn from all these things. And now notice if we missed one of them for everybody, because I'm sure somebody missed like 1 or 2 or 3. Notice, did I visualize it? Did I add emotion to it? These keys to encoding we talked about. It was stress management, right? So you're thinking about what was stress. And here's the thing: if somebody listened to it and just said, "Oh, I'll remember that stress management because it's the last one," and then picture it, you won't remember it. So maybe you're getting a back rub on this bonsai trees. Maybe you're meditating. Maybe you're having some red wine, whatever. It helps you to relax and manage your stress. But my thing here is, how do we do? I think most people would say, if I had to memorize, all 10 things in order, it'd be very difficult. But now you go through this journey and you have it. And most people, I think, can do it backwards, Kris. If we start from the bonsai trees, what's on the bonsai trees? What does that remind you of? It reminds you of what? And everyone can just do this with us. It reminds you of stress management. And then the whiteboard, right before that, what am I writing on the whiteboard?
Learning, yeah.
Yeah, learning. And then before that was the door. How did everyone get in the door? They put on the what?
The helmet.
Helmet, brain protection. Before the door was the fish tank. What were all the fish doing?
Yeah, sleeping.
Sleeping, get your sleep. And right in front of the fish tank was the receptionist. What's the receptionist doing?
Cleaning.
Clean environment, very good for your brain. And before the receptionist was the closet. Who's in the closet?
Our friends.
Yeah, all our good, happy friends. And then before that was the hallway. What's rolling on the hallway?
The nootropics.
Yeah, the nootropics. And then before that was the elevator. What are we doing in the elevator?
We're exercising.
Exercising is good for the brain. And then before the elevator was the bridge, right? What are we doing on the bridge? We're killing what? Ants. And then finally, right before the bridge, we started with the parking lot, where we were making what? We were making all those.
Everything without the salmon.
Yeah, all the food except for the salmon, all the brain foods. That's reminding you of brain foods. So this technique, it's like a location method. You could do this for anything. We teach clients, they can make a list of places in their home. Start in the kitchen. Imagine you're in the kitchen, stay in the kitchen. The first place, go clockwise. First place is the microwave. Second place is the stovetop. Third place is the refrigerator. The fourth place is the dishwasher. The fifth place is the sink. Then you go into the next room, right? Maybe it's the dining room, and they're like, okay, the sliding glass door is 6th place. The radiator is the 7th place. The china cabinet is the 8th place. The dining room table is the 9th place. That lamp is the 10th place. And you can go all in your house and your home, and you go room to room, and just the fireplace is number 11, the bookshelf is number 12, the piano is number 13, the couch is number 14, the TV is number 15. And all of a sudden you have new places. You do it in your office. You do it in your car. And then, or you can do it on your briefcase. The zipper is this, the first place. The side pocket is this. And then when you go into a meeting and people are talking to you, you need to remember things about a client or your product information or a sales pitch. You put your key points. The key is to turn it into a picture. Tip, turn into picture. TIP. Turn into picture. Because we don't remember what we hear, we remember what we see. Notice this. This is a perfect example. There's a Chinese proverb that goes, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. And what I do, I understand. What I hear, I forget. I heard the name, I forgot the name. What I see, I remember. I saw the face, I remember the face. And what I do, going back to practice and exercise, we understand, right? So we tend to remember, you go to someone and say, I remember your face, but I forgot your name. You never go to someone and say the opposite. Hey, I remember your name, but I forgot your face, right? That wouldn't make any sense. We remember what we see. So if we tend to remember what we see, then try seeing what we want to remember. That's why we turn everything into a picture, because it makes it more memorable for us, because our visual cortex actually is larger and can hold more information. And so I would invite everybody, if you have a challenge to remember things, try remembering the things in pictures, and then you're going to remember it a lot better. So turn those pictures, put it into a place, and you'll recall it forwards and backwards. And it's fun, right? It's not boring. And so you can remember client information, speeches, facts, and so much more.
Yeah, that was very powerful, because that surprised me how much I was able to remember. So it's something that I can definitely apply, and all of our listeners can apply for sure. Now, I feel like we're scratching the surface here, and there's so much more I'd love to learn from you. So where can people find out more information? How can they extract more from you, whether it be your podcast or books or whatever it may be? I don't know if you do a tour.
Yeah, the three best places, Kris, and I, first of all, as you're listening to this, thank you for everyone who's listening, because you're still listening to this. I know we went over time in this conversation, but I hope people realize that this is an important topic. When can we be talking about the most important wealth building and health building device you have, which is your mind, right? Because it controls everything. So number one, for people interested in going deep into this, we publish online programs. So we have a 30-day speed reading course, a 30-day focus program, a 30-day incredible memory course, and people can go to quicklearning.com. That's just KWIK learning.com, and all those programs are there. They're self-paced, and they're pretty amazing. We triple people's reading speed. I mean, basically read something in 20 minutes that normally takes an hour. And not only read it, but you're not skimming it, you're retaining it so you can apply it.
So
second place.
Sorry, would you suggest people start with, if they see all these programs, they don't know which to start with?
Really, it's like, okay, so really whatever someone's greatest need is, usually I like people starting, like some people really want to read more. I think leaders are readers. So specifically, most people read like 1 or 2 books a year. Yeah, I like to get people I read a book a day for more than 4.5 years, 5 years. And I feel like that if somebody wrote a book and they spent their entire life becoming an expert in something, and you could read it, they have decades experience, and they put it into a book, and you could download decades into days, that's the biggest advantage. Reading is the best exercise for your mind, especially the way we teach it. So it's not speed reading, it's really smart reading. And so for people that just overloaded with information, go there. For those people who are suffering from digital overload, go to the reading program. For those of you suffering from memory issues like forgetfulness and absent-minded, senior moments are coming too early, and you have so much you need to retain, then that would be our quick recall program. And those are people who really want to triple their memory power and learn names, numbers, languages, conversations, give presentations without notes, facts, figures, everything that would make you more efficient. Because I believe in business, 2 of the most costly words are I forgot. I forgot to do it. I forgot to bring it. I forgot that conversation. I forgot that meeting. I forgot your name, all of that. And that doesn't have to happen. Or the third thing, we talked about digital overload. That's for the reading program. Digital dementia, that's the memory program. But the other one is digital distraction. So if you have trouble focusing, then we have a quick focus program. That's 21 to 30 days to just having concentration to get things done. If you can't concentrate, you don't have your power. It's like a laser. I mean, like you look outside and, if you put a magnifying glass, it creates this really bright light, right? And it's that word bright we use to describe people who are smart or intelligent, but maybe they're not more intelligent or bright or smart. Maybe they're just better focused, right? And so focus is power. And so for those people who struggle with focus, then that would be the starting point. So those are our online programs. Now, for people that just getting started, and that's for people who really want the edge. They want to master things, and they just want a clear advantage. For people who just want to sample our work, one of the best places is our podcast. We have a podcast only 10, 15 minutes long, and we did one on how to remember names, how to change your habits, my top 10 favorite brain foods, how to memorize them, how to be a better listener. And so those are like bite-sized brain hacks for busy people and to learn faster, achieve more. Those are tips. So the high level, what I was talking about before, is training, right? Really conditioning yourself so that you are mentally fit. But for those people, there's a difference between training and tips. So the podcast is free, and so people can listen to it and get some great tips that you use right away. And then the third place people could find me is like how they find you also is on social media. You and I know are very active on that. And so I'm just at Jim Kwik, Kwik, so I have to spell it right. The podcast, by the way, is Kwik Brain. So it's KWIKbrain.com. You go there, you get a bunch of free training plus access to our podcast also as well, all the links. And a special invite to our private Facebook group, where I do Facebook Lives and answer questions and take topics. But the last place is at Jim Kwik on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And I do, just like I do a lot of posts every single day on, that are not only inspirational but also instructional. And so it's the best way for people to connect with me. I do Instagram Lives 3 times a week, where I do like kind of quick tips and quick Q&As, if you will. And what I would suggest, really, is everybody screenshots this episode. So screenshot it right now on your phone, post it on your favorite social media platform, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and then tag both of us on it. And then post, remember I opened it saying, those who teach get to learn it twice. I want you to screenshot this episode, tag Kris, tag myself, at Jim Kwik, Kwik, and then teach something to your community. Put your biggest aha on there that you learned from this episode. So you might need to go back through your notes. On our podcast, we did an incredible episode on how to take notes the best way. So put your 2 things, your biggest aha from this conversation, and number 2, your biggest question, because I'll see it also, and I'll try to go through and answer some of the questions also as well. So I challenge people to be able to do that. That's a quick challenge.
Yeah, that's a great challenge, because funnily enough, I was going to ask you, what challenge can we put out there now? So quite often I'll put out a challenge, like for the past month, I put out the challenge, I want everybody to take a cold shower every single day.
Oh, that's so good.
To get into the habit of creating a discipline that you can transfer onto other areas of your life. And I wanted to ask you, what could be the next challenge we could put out there? Maybe this is it. This would be great.
I would challenge everyone to do that right now. What you teach, you get to learn twice. So take a screenshot, tag us both in it, and put your big aha. What was your biggest takeaway? So that way we could share this knowledge with other people who could benefit from it. And if you have a question, include that there also as well. But I love that idea of a challenge. I'm actually going to take a nice bath right now.
There you go. The thing is, you have to film yourself. So it's a funny thing, because I'll encourage people and I will recognize them, maybe send them some supplements or something like that. And I was saying to my girlfriend yesterday, it feels kind of odd that I'm looking at all these videos of guys that have taken of themselves in showers. But hey, that's what I asked. Anyway, I can personally vouch for your podcast because I listen to that all the time. It is a fantastic resource. It's very motivational. And I will definitely be taking you up on that first program of yours on, I want to read more. I love reading, but I wish I could be, like I said, Ryan DeLuca, that I could read much more, and like yourself, faster and more efficient. So I'm going to be taking that course up, and I'll share that with my viewers on how it worked for me as well.
Good.
But I want to thank you ever so much for your time. I know it's very, very precious, and your time have been very, very efficient for my listeners. So I want to thank you ever so much for your time and the knowledge that you've shared. And I'm sure it's going to really help a lot of people, and it's going to be a crowdsource of inspiration that they will spread to others.
Kris, I want to thank you for the platform that you built. I mean, I literally see you as a real life superhero. I mean, obviously you look like a superhero as it is, but I see the cape that's there, because a superhero for me, like many of your listeners, you're on the quest to discover and develop your superpowers, but just having a superpower doesn't make you a superhero. You got to use that power for good. So you're impacting like millions of people. So I applaud you and thank you for doing that. Big respect. And if people are listening to this right now, my words to you here are this: that your life is like an egg that if an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. But if it's broken by an inside force, life begins. And I believe all great things begin on the inside. And you have greatness inside of you. You have genius inside of you. So let's let it out together. Let's do this.
That's awesome. That's powerful. Thank you very much, Jim. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Kris.
All right. Until next time, guys, that is the Knowledge and Mileage podcast. A great episode. I'm sure you'll agree. So please do take Jim up on that challenge and screenshot and share that challenge and tag both of us. And until next time, I will speak to you, and over and out.